Hey guys, Mike Fronter here, back with another retirement theory video. So, let's be honest. Do you love your job? Do you wake up in the morning excited for the prospect of another working day? Or are you just putting in your time waiting for retirement so that you can finally enjoy your life? Maybe that job that once challenged you and excited you just doesn't anymore. The long hours, constant pressure and stress. You've been doing what everyone has been telling you to do. You work hard, you save, invest your money, and you start to wonder, is it that crazy to think about retiring early? So if that's been on your mind, you're not alone. I've seen it more times than I can count. People with strong savings that are stuck in a job that they really don't enjoy because they are afraid that they can't afford to retire. But what I've seen more often than not is people don't end up spending all that money they worked so hard to save during those years. And a lot of them could have stepped away much earlier if they had only had a little more clarity of how much is enough. So it's a clarity issue, but it's also a mindset issue. People want to be 100% sure that they have saved enough money before pulling the trigger and retiring. And all of the worry and focus is on, I have to have enough so that I don't ever run out. And yes, it is a big problem to run out of money in retirement, but there is hardly ever even a thought given to running out of a much more important resource, your time. And more specifically, your time while you still have a very high quality of life. So then how do we reconcile these two things? How do you get clarity around how much stuff costs in retirement? And then how can you shift your mindset to put a proper value on your time and your health? So let's try to answer that. But first, if you like this video, do me a favor, hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button too. Okay, let's start with the practical side, the part where we're actually putting numbers to this. First, let's take a closer look at what you're planning to spend in retirement. And we should put things into two broad categories: non-negotiables and nice-to-haves. So non-negotiables are the basics, right? You can think of these as your mortgage, utility bills, food, insurance, basic transportation. These are the things that you simply have to cover. And yes, you should have a high degree of reliability around these expenses. But it's that second category, those more discretionary expenses, that people actually tend to oversave for. These might be things like extended travel, luxury upgrades, large gifts to family, second homes, or just general lifestyle perks. Now, don't get me wrong, those things are awesome. But what does it actually cost to pay for these things? And not just in dollar terms, but in time. Because here's the trade that you're making. You are giving up your healthiest and most vibrant years to be able to afford more stuff in retirement. But if you took a moment and take a step back, would you actually trade that time for a slightly nicer car, more international trips, or some extra shopping on Amazon? So I sometimes try to encourage people to try this exercise. Try to quantify your remaining healthy and active time. No guarantees, just a ballpark. So let's say that you're 60 years old and you estimate that to be 20 more years. So if you choose to work just 2 more years, that is 10% of your remaining high quality years. That's 730 mornings of waking up without an alarm clock, enjoying the morning in your coffee slowly instead of sitting in traffic and answering emails. It's over 100 weekends you could be spending with your grandchildren, traveling, or just doing whatever it is that gives you peace. 2 years of freedom of what is likely going to be the best you'll ever feel. So is that trade worth it? Well, for some people it is, but for other people it isn't. And the point is that most people never even ask the question. They focus so much on never running out of money that they end up overspending on time. But when you actually run the numbers, you may discover that even partially funding these discretionary expenses, maybe traveling a little bit less or buying used instead of new, may allow you to retire a year or two earlier and gain that time back while you're still able to enjoy it. Because once your health starts to decline, there is no amount of money that can bring that time back. So when you're planning for retirement, it's not enough to ask, will I have enough money? It's also about asking, what's it worth to have more time? So let's walk through a quick example with our pals Jerry and Ginny and see how they answer the question for themselves. All right, so Jerry and Ginny are looking to retire at 65 years old. And the first thing that we look at is something called a Monte Carlo simulation here. And basically what this simulation does is it takes their portfolio, their income, their expenses, and it combines it all together and says, what is the probability of success? And by probability of success, it runs 1,000 different trials, 1,000 different hypothetical scenarios, and says, in a great market, that might be one scenario. In a bad market might be another scenario, and just runs 1,000 different randomized trials and says, how many of those trials does Jerry and Ginny get to the end of their lives and they still have money left over? And so in this case, it's 91%. And that usually means that they are in really good shape for their goals, whatever it is. In this case, for their retirement at 65. So let's put some real numbers to it. And this is one of my favorite reports. This is called a cash flow overview. So this is an overview here of what their portfolio looks like over their entire retirement lives. And over here on the left, this is sort of like a 30,000 foot view of red being their expenses that they're going to experience in retirement and green being the income. So let's actually look at the numbers behind it. So you'll see that Ginny has 40,000 of income, Jerry has 300,000 of income. And they're planning to work for the next 6 years. So you'll see that their income keeps coming in. They keep saving into their 401ks and their 403b. They're basically looking to keep their current lifestyle the same in retirement. So let's take a look at these expenses, because you'll probably see here that there's a big drop between ages 64 and 65. So if they're looking to keep their retirement expenses basically the same, what's going on there? So if we click in, we'll be able to get more details on what these expenses are that they're covering. So they have a big liability payment. That's the mortgage on their house. Okay, and so that mortgage essentially gets paid down 2029. There's still a little bit there, probably a few payments, and then it's gone. If we click into it, we'll see, okay, we've got a little bit of a credit card payment there, but beyond that, it's mostly the mortgage on the house. Then we have these catch-all living expenses. And the living expenses about $4,000 a month. This is all the bills, utilities, upkeep on the house, all the things that we would call the must-haves, not the nice-to-haves. And that, you see, we have going on indefinitely, raising up each year for inflation throughout their retirement lives. Then we have insurance premiums. So there's a whole life policy on Jerry. They each have long-term care insurance. And so they've got a bunch of money going out each year for insurance. That's also a must-have, not a nice-to-have, at least in their case. So then the next thing, these other expense flows, this is where we're going to see some of these more discretionary, fun expenses coming in for them. So you'll see they've got dining out. They spend about $800 a month or $9,600 a year. $7,500 a year is gifts to family. There is some house upkeep money in here too. You'll see that there's money for a car for Jerry and for Ginny every few years. You have Medicare expenses coming in. And then they have this big catch-all, just fun spending. It's not necessarily for anything that's a have-to-have. This is like a nice-to-have fund of about $40,000 a year. And that's the same as what they're spending now. So they want to keep that constant in retirement. Same for this retirement travel. Okay, it is going on now, and it's going to keep going basically until Jerry and Ginny are 85 years old. So really, most of the expenses aren't changing. But if we go back out, we will see the big change here is when they stop working and they don't have that earned income that is kicking off a ton of money in taxes. Their taxes paid go way down. So why does it go down so much? That does seem like a big drop from $146,000 down to about $1,400. And the big reason is if we look at what their portfolio is made up of, so you'll see that they've got about $895,000 in joint investment, taxable investment account. A lot of this money is going to come out either as after-tax return of principal, Maybe there'll be some long-term capital gains, which if they don't have any other income, a lot of those capital gains are going to come out at 0%. And so we're at least going under the assumption now that we're spending that money first. And so that's why those income taxes become so much lower. And in fact, if we go back in, you'll see that as they run through that money, so a number of years down the road, all of a sudden now they're getting into, you've got actually required withdrawals here, but a lot of the money that is covering their expenses is now coming from their retirement accounts. So now when we look at that, we just kind of isolate the portfolio itself and how it's projected over time, we can see they're from age 59, they've got about $2.3 million in portfolio assets here. And between 59 and 65, they're looking to push that up to almost $3.5 million. So they have a lot of money here that they can throw at these retirement expenses. And because their retirement withdrawal rate is so sustainable, you can see that actually, even as they are drawing money out, because of the growth on the portfolio, they're pretty well keeping up with their portfolio value until they hit about age 80. So, but now we have a problem. Jerry and Ginny have come in and they say, Mike, we don't want to work till 65. We're both super burned out. We don't want to do what we're doing anymore. When can we retire? Or can we afford to pull back, say, 3 years and maybe retire at 62, which seems a lot more palatable than working till 65. So, all right, so let's take a look. If we do that without changing anything else, well, looks like we're running out of money a lot faster. Oh, and we forgot. Because they are retiring at 62 instead of 65, they have to bridge that gap between their working years and Medicare with some health insurance at about $22,000 a year. So that's going to have even a bigger impact. Now they've lost 11 years of funding. So now what's happened with that Monte Carlo summary is instead of being 91% probability of success, they've gone down to about 32%. Not very sustainable. So that's obviously not going to work for them. So they say, we want to be able to enjoy this retirement life sooner. This is killing us to do this job. So I say, well, would you be willing to work part-time? And they say, yeah, we could work part-time for a little while, maybe earn maybe a couple $1,000s a month. So say, okay, let's do that. Let's assume that you were able to work part-time and earn $24,000 a year for 7 years. And you could see that actually gets us back a couple years of funding. So then we turn to their home. We say, okay, what about the house here? And you've got this beautiful house. Are you willing to downsize that in retirement? And Ginny says, yeah, we would definitely downsize in retirement. So let's add that back into these assumptions and say, yeah, we're going to downsize our house from an $850,000 house that we have now to something that's about $500,000. So when we do that, we're also going to lower our house costs each year by about $4,000 because it costs less to keep up that $500,000, that $850,000 house. So these are all things that they're already very willing to do, and you can see already we're making some progress. In fact, if we make those changes, we're going to see that Monte Carlo summary push way up too. So here it is, 79%. That's very reasonable. I've had people retire around that 80% probability of success, as long as you have some willingness to make adjustments if the market doesn't cooperate. That is a reasonable place to be. So then we start talking about their cars and say, can we reduce how much you are spending on your cars? And they say, sure, we can do that. So instead of buying $50,000 cars every few years, we're going to buy $36,000 cars every few years. So then we take a little bit of a closer examination of some of these discretionary expenses, which we have a catch-all here at about $40,000 a year. And they say, well, if we could trim back about 10,000 of those, and they've gone through those expenses and say, yeah, we could cut those back by about 10,000 a year if we had to. Now they're actually in better shape financially than if they had continued working until 65. So now we're tossing these things around, and Jerry says, well, you know what? I'm kind of burned out on working altogether. So I know this is kind of a big one, but I don't want to work at all part-time. So we do that, and then we can kind of see, all right, well, that's going to have an impact, but really not dramatically so. And so part of this exercise of going through with Jerry and Ginny is figuring out, well, where do these priorities lie, right? Maybe you don't want to have to do any kind of part-time work, or maybe you say, well, we give $7,500 a year to family. Maybe we could reduce that down to $6,000. And Ginny says, yeah, well, that means that I can go and have my nice car again. So then they look again and they say, we're a little nervous about cutting this spending back by $10,000 a year. That's actually would cut out a lot of stuff that we really love. So we say, okay, let's go in there. Let's make this a $5,000 reduction. Is that something that you guys think you could handle? And they both say, yeah, we could. And so we re-look at this projection. So we say, okay, this looks pretty sustainable. Let's take a look at that Monte Carlo summary. Okay, and so now we're at about 88%. And so you want to put these different expense items and income items like part-time income against your time of working in a way where you can compare them and see where do your priorities lie. And for Jerry and Ginny, their priorities lied where they could take a small reduction in their miscellaneous expenses, have Ginny get a slightly less expensive car, maybe downsize their house, and get 3. Remember, at the end of the day, it comes down to a single idea. Your time and health have value. And just like your financial resources, they're not unlimited and they're not guaranteed. So when you're thinking about retirement, instead of just asking, do I have enough money? Be sure to ask yourself, do I want more money or do I want more time? Planning for retirement is not only about making sure you have enough money in the bank. It's about gaining clarity on what truly matters to you, seeing the real cost of things, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of time, weighing what you're spending money on versus how much time it takes to get there. So, do you have questions for me? Let me know. Come visit me at www.retirementtheory.com or send me an email at mike@retirementtheory.com. Once again, thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.